Now, another problem that we've encountered with the pagans is that from the outset, because there's such an ingrained assumption of relativism, they will disagree with the universality of logic or any universal principles, because that will be seen as the invalid universalism of monotheism, right? Any attempt to universalize logic, rules of thought, critical thinking, reasoning will sort of be cut off at the outset, because they'll say, oh, no, you see, the only reason you think that there's universal laws of logic or reasoning or universal categories or universals is because you think that there's some overarching principle that rules things. Now, on a metaphysical level, what is the assumption there? Well, right away, we see that the pagan position kind of hinges then on a ultimate principle that's dysteleological or chaos. So it's not really that there's all these gods, right? Like superheroes or something, like not Samson. Hercules is running around getting laid and sleeping with the goddesses, and, you know, Zeus is over there turning into a goose, sleeping with hoes. All the stuff that, you know, the pagan gods were up to. It's not that they're actually running the show, okay? In most of the ancient pagan systems, who runs stuff? Who run this thing? Who's running the show? Chaos.
Total chaos. You might be thinking of chaos. And if you think chaos has order, you might be thinking wrong.
No, chaos rules in this system. So the ultimate metaphysical principle, let's start with metaphysics. Within every pagan system I've seen, maybe that one dude was at least trying to use Aristotle to argue that it's not all chaos and it's not purely relativistic ethics. But everyone, all the other ones, like 99.9% of them, are basically arguing then that it's the metaphysics is chaos. And so if chaos rules, or the fates, the ancient pagan world would talk about the fates, them three mean bitches, the fates. If the mean bitches are organizing reality such that it's chaos and determinism, your destiny, the mean three bitches are who are not personal. It's impersonal. They just represent chaos, the forces of nature. So if reality ultimately is, here's the word, dysteleological, what that means is that it doesn't have any overriding purpose, not in its totality or in its particulars. So if there's no telos or purpose, if reality is dysteleological, not moving towards any end, purpose, end goal, then it seems to follow then that nothing particular in reality is meaningful. So there's nothing outside of you that gives anything meaning, because as soon as you start asking 99.9% of these pagans about the gods, what do the gods end up being? Symbolic representations of ideals, virtues, vices, morality tales, tribal symbols, I don't know, right? All these different things. So they're not really metaphysically existing entities. Although maybe some of these people, I don't know, maybe they go into the woods and they drink the wolf blood and they see Odin and I don't know, did he pop out and he, you know, shoots the shit? I don't know. Maybe some of them do. If chaos, fate, and a dysteleological principle rule, then meaning is not something objective, and typically we end up with pure subjectivism. And that's the next point, is that after we get the metaphysical dominance of chaos and fate, the next principle in terms of epistemology then, well, let me make one more point about the metaphysics. So you notice in the metaphysics is very ad hoc. So the gods aren't real. But part of the reason people find paganism appealing is that they don't find postmodernism and naturalism and atheism appealing. And they see liberal Christianity, liberal modern Western religions as vacant, empty, C-U-C-K-E-D, which they are. And so they're looking for something to find that is authentic, that's historical, that has meaning, that can give a principle to heritage, tradition, family, etc. And so the first assumption is that, well, all of Christianity is equivalent to Vatican II Catholicism or liberal Protestantism. And so, number one, that's not the case, right? And so our whole position is that we would actually agree with you in pointing out that those things are pitiful, pathetic husks of religion that are on the point of the deathbed. So I would say that the critique that they give there doesn't apply to us. Think of Nietzsche's critique of the weakness of Christianity, which would be a critique we would agree with if we're talking about the liberal German Protestantism of his day, or the kind of weirdness of the Roman Catholic traditional world with the women saints, the histrionics, the effeminacy, all of this kind of stuff. And we would agree with those critiques. You know, if you read Nietzsche's critiques of the Christianity of his day, they're great. I agree with those. Okay. And I don't think that, properly speaking, they actually apply to classic Orthodox Christianity. So that's what we're here to defend. So let's make another point too about worldviews, because what we're doing here is, remember how this works, guys. We critique everybody's worldview on the basis of the three elements of a philosophy or a system, a worldview: epistemology, metaphysics, and ethics. So one thing that happens is that, you know, the pagan is not typically thinking in this way. The neo-pagan, he's typically not interested in philosophy or philosophy questions per se. There might be elements of it that he's interested in. But the pagan is interested is basically setting up a system that, in my view, my critique as I've looked at this the last couple of years and had these debates, it's almost like there's enough appearance of things to latch on to, like family, heritage, tradition, transcendence, ritual is a big part of it, and the sacred. So neo-paganism gives the appearance of having the sacred, having ritual, meaning, history, tradition, family, right? And those are the things that are appealing to people. And so they're sort of latching onto this, looking for authentic expressions, because they don't see that in liberal Protestantism or Rome, in especially 20th century Rome. And so they will typically say Christianity itself is a liberalizing movement that has perverted Western man. Now, the first assumption that's false in this is that there is this glorious pre-Christian Western man. No, I don't think that exists. Okay, if you read Caesar's accounts of the different tribes and how he would play them off against one another and what he says about them, he talks about how degenerate they were, and you know how his diaries, how they would do human sacrifice and all this stuff. Well, so wait a minute, the pagan says that's all false, we didn't do that. Well, now wait a minute, is paganism exemplified in the imperial majesty of Rome, or is paganism exemplified in the various barbarian tribes that fought and sacked Rome? You see how this begins to be completely arbitrary. On the one hand, oh no, it's all a myth that Christians promoted, that we did human sacrifice. No, well, I mean, Caesar wasn't a Christian when he talked about that. What do you mean? And by the way, why wouldn't you have practiced human sacrifice, given the fact that all of the ancient cultures practiced human sacrifice? I mean, why are you magically exempted from this somehow, right? And of course, many people, I've made this critique for at least 10 years. If the glories of the pre-pagan men were so fantastical as they would have us believe, how did they succumb to something so weak as Christianity? If the pagan, right, the pagan says Christianity is just emblem of weakness. Okay, so the greatest emblem of weakness in history completely destroyed you. So you're the greatest weakness in history. See how dumb this is, right? And so it's not actually based in history. It's based in sort of bite-sized propaganda phraseology. Another thing that's done is a sort of sweeping analysis of motives. So, for example, the recent debate I mentioned, because Christianity emerges from the Old Testament Hebrew religion, the assumption is that it is then a plot to dupe everybody and subvert their cultures. Ironically, there's another view that is not as popular as the neo-pagan view, but a couple people online who argue this Roman theory, which is the opposite. No, you see, Christianity is an invention of the Roman elite families to subvert rebellious Judaism, the Maccabees, the Zealots, and turn the religion to a controlled thing of the Roman Imperium. So, first of all, it can't be both of those things, right? It can't be Roman provenance theory and the Hebrew conspiracy, right? It can't be both of those.